At the time of this recording, the Soulsborne series has been out for over a decade. Started with Demon's Souls in 2009 and culminated more recently with Sekiro: Shadows Die Twice. In this decade of releases and the creation of an entire Souls-like subgenre, you will think there's not much I could tell you about Dark Souls 3, but given what I read and seen online, I think there's still a cent or two I can throw in to make a difference. Dark Souls 3 takes place as the culmination of events of Dark Souls 1 and Dark Souls 2. After countless cycles of light and dark, our player character, the Ashen One, is charged with the duty of bringing back the Lords of Cinder and maintain the Age of Fire once more. And that's it. Much like with the previous games, the entire plot of Dark Souls 3 is confined to environmental storytelling and flavor text, which works wonders because the greatest forte of these games will forever be the gameplay. The gameplay in the Souls genre has always been infamous for its difficulty, an aspect FromSoftware has always worn with pride. Anything you heard about these games being really hard is both true and false. This is not the kind of game you can casually play and just get it over with in just a few days. Any player, even veterans of this genre, will be killed time and time again if they're not careful. And even if you are careful, you do risk into running into a frustrating wall of deaths. But as true as this might ring, the difficulty is not impossible to overcome. Adaptability is the name of the game here. For all of its scares about how difficult it is, the game gives you plenty of tools to mitigate said difficulty and adapt to your circumstances proper. Because one thing the Soulsborne game has done very often is drop piles of items to you. New armor sets, new weapons, spots that you can use to grind for souls to give yourself a little boost. You can even request the help of other players via summoning to help you out. In all my Souls runs, I have found myself changing my build and my playstyle constantly, and contrary to what the more elitist fans might tell you, there really is no shame in asking for help. Complementing the gameplay, we get the visuals. Out of all of the Souls trilogy, I will argue 3 is the most beautiful to look at. A mountain at the top of the world, the ruined streets of a long-fallen settlement, a castle whose soldiers still mount guard for long after their minds have been lost, just to name a few examples. The environments that are still in this game are simply beautiful to look at, and this game in particular is a big testament to the statement that video games are indeed an art form. You can tell just how much love and effort and care went into this game just by looking at those visuals. The level of details and animations in this game are also very just staggering, and I think nothing encapsulates this beauty more than the boss fights. The bosses in Dark Souls 3, much like some of the regular enemies, are the most aggressive in the entire trilogy. Their difficulty curve, their smooth animations, the way the music is implemented into the fight for both of their main phases makes every attempt at fighting them a whole adventure in itself, even if they will be a big part of your deaths throughout your journey. However, figuring out these bosses with each attempt is part of the fun. Taking out these mighty monsters while you're just a tiny warrior just trying to survive makes it all the more epic when you finally defeat them and the words "Air of Fire Destroyed" pop up on your screen. If I had to list any real downside to Dark Souls 3, it will have to be the difficulty curve. In my entire run, I had more trouble dealing with heavier enemies than the bosses themselves. Regular enemies can be tricky to deal with as well, since they also tend to attack in large numbers, and as I mentioned earlier, these are the most aggressive enemies in the entire trilogy. But even that got eventually mitigated when I started changing playstyles. Also helped remembering that while this is a combat-heavy game, I don't really have to kill everything I see. At least not until I am strong enough, that is, or got the tools needed to avoid taking as much damage as possible. Basically, this downside has more to do with having to be patient and learn the mechanics of the game, which are very unforgiving, than them being like a real downside. Even with those minor issues, I will still argue that Dark Souls 3 is one of the best games I had the pleasure to play. I will even go as far to dare and say it's one of the few games that have given me a perfect gaming experience. And much like I will probably do it with the first Dark Souls if I reviewed it, I am giving Dark Souls 3 a perfect, well-deserved, and very subjective in my humble little opinion, 10 out of 10. Because if there is one thing the Soulsborne genre has taught me, is how beautiful and satisfactory it feels to overcome great challenges. Also, it taught me the virtue of how much it pays to be patient.